The Bain family originated in Dunedin, New Zealand, a breathtakingly gorgeous place that almost seems unreal. Additionally, the population of that area in 1994, when this occurrence occurred, was less than 100,000. Thus, while it's not small, it's also not enormous. Father Robin Bain and Mother Margaret Cullen made up the Bain family. They met in the Presbyterian Church and moved in together immediately. Robin, who was 33, and Margaret, who was 25, were both from large families, so when they got married in 1969, they were eager to start their own large family and have a lot of children together. On March 27, 1972, they welcomed their first child, a son called David. The family subsequently relocated from New Zealand to Gollum, Papua New Guinea, which is a small, remote island off the east coast of the country, 2 years after David was born. In addition, Margaret studied anthropology while Robin worked at the Teachers Training College. When they returned home, they welcomed 2 more girls into their family. Leonie was born in 1976, and Aria, their daughter, was born in 1975. Then moved to Port Moresby, the capital of Papua New Guinea, 6 years after joining the family. I had arrived at the main island. They resided in a compound where Margaret gave birth to their 4th and last child in 1980. Robin worked at a school there that provided quick refresher courses for people. The same family reared their family in Papua New Guinea, where they had a boy named Stephen. They fully accepted the way of life and fully immersed themselves, their kids, and the community in local culture. Their home was noted for being quite disorderly and was filled with traditional furnishings and relics. The family was believed to have led a somewhat carefree lifestyle and to have a reputation for being rather strange. The children were often running around in their underwear, and it seems like Margaret didn't do anything at the house. The place was described as somewhat of a madhouse with a wild feel to it, and there weren't really many regulations. Because of the way her family lived, it actually got to the point that Margaret started to worry about their wellness. She went to a psychologist who evaluated each family member, and this psychologist said that David had that strange expression on his face while he was staring at you. Subsequently, he mentioned that Robin, the father, lacked any emotion. He had lost all of his power. Those who knew the family's neighbors characterized Margaret as amiable and enjoyable. They said Robin was more honest and restrained than his wife, and that she laughed all the time. Furthermore, he desired a 5th child, an additional one. Robin was very devoted to his family, and he essentially just went along with whatever made Margaret happy. But Margaret didn't fall, was enough for her, and was also recognized as the dominant partner in the marriage. After serving as missionaries in Papua New Guinea for 15 years, the family finally made the decision in 1988 to return to Dunedin, New Zealand, and their family's dilapidated family home. It was obviously far worse 15 years after they departed, since it wasn't looking well when they left in the first place. However, after all that time spent in a developing nation, they were also no longer very bothered by the way it seemed at this point. David had to have been about 16 by now, as their kids were all pretty much teenagers. Stephen was 10, Leonie Out was 12, and Aaliyah was 14. So they hadn't been in New Zealand before. Growing up, they had lived in Papua New Guinea. They were simply unaccustomed to returning to New Zealand after migrating. For example, they had severe cultural shock when it came to the educational system. However, because they were young, they were able to gradually blend in. They developed a strong interest in music and theater, which helped them feel like they belonged. Robin, though, found it more difficult to adapt. It made him 58 years old. He had a terrible time finding a regular work in Dunedin, so he took the only position that was offered to him, principal of Taieri Primary School, which was roughly 50 kilometers distant from their home. Additionally, there were just 2 teachers at this tiny institution. Thus, it was a significant decline for him. It was also a fairly long commute, 50 kilometers each way every day, which requires a significant commitment. However, it was just a job, and he had to take care of, feed, and look after his wife and several children. He therefore desired to maximize it. When they returned to Geneva, 50-year-old Margaret was unemployed. She took care of the house and the children, and I believe she was still a part of the chaotic family atmosphere they had in Papua New Guinea. Being somewhat of a hoarder, she would frequently bring home a variety of strange items from garage sales, which she loved going to. She was kind of fascinated with bottling food, so the house was usually messy and dirty. She would also stack fruit bottles all over the place. I'm not sure. She also developed a strong interest in New Age spiritualism and the idea that she had to keep evil spirits away from her family. Her spouse Robin was one of these demonic spirits. In fact, she thought Robin was the devil incarnate, which is why she called him Balial. Furthermore, Balial is essentially the devil's name in the Bible. As a result, she constantly referred to him as Belial, one of the 4 crown princesses of hell, and I think she even attempted to exorcise him at one point. She also kept a journal in which she listed her family members' possessions in ascending order. Robin was clearly the most possessed, and Laniet was closely after. The least possessive member of her family was David. She also stopped doing anything around the house and started writing in her diary incessantly. For the most part, she stopped communicating with her family. They had a trailer in their backyard, and she would just go there, shut herself up, and write in her diary. She used to write about every emotion she had for each member of her family. It was also quite evident from her diary that she preferred David. Given that she believed Robin to be the devil and that she was plainly speaking to him, it is clear that she did not like her. She was referring to him as the devil, you know. She attempted to perform exorcisms on him. Leonie would thus frequently defend her father and say things like, "Hey, stop it. This is not cool, nor is it kind. He's not the Antichrist." Because Leonie frequently defended her father, she therefore disliked her. It was obviously abnormal conduct. Robin was rather concerned as a result. He ultimately made contact with a close family friend who lives in Papua New Guinea. After speaking with Margaret over the phone, the family friend flew to New Zealand and was instantly alarmed by her actions. Margaret was expressing beliefs at this stage, such as the belief that she was acquainted with Winston Churchill during a past life. She also expressed her belief that she and her family friend from Papua New Guinea had a very close relationship. She was expressing her belief that she had a bond similar to that of a sister or mother-daughter in a past life. And it got to the point that this family friend thought she was really insane. Margaret eventually returned to living in the primary family house instead of the rear camper. However, everything remained incredibly abnormal. She had become distant from Robin by 1994, and she had even kicked Robin out of the house. He was therefore living in his car or spending most of his evenings in an old schoolhouse in Tyree, returning to the family home on Mondays and weekends. Additionally, he would have to stay in the garden, the backyard, or the caravan when he was at the family house. Apologies. Margaret apparently threatened to shoot Robin if she could at this same moment, according to reports. Therefore, it was kind of common knowledge that they were experiencing marital issues. During this period, Margaret was also recording in her diary her feelings of alienation from her family and her sense of losing control over them. She therefore devised an intricate plan to either build a new house or have the one they were residing in demolished in an effort to regain control over her family. It was packed too full. She had accumulated so much stuff over the years that it was now overflowing from the house, as you might imagine. It was merely disorganized. Her goal was to demolish everything and construct a large retreat where outsiders may come and stay and converse with God in unison. David helped her plan the entire affair, and he was a huge support to her during the entire undertaking. He assisted her with planning and drawing. He assisted in clearing some of the garden's debris and preparing it for this major undertaking. Furthermore, he genuinely supported his mother. He was actually rooting for her. Nor could it be stated that he felt the same way about his father. After that, I believe Robin and David had a really turbulent relationship, since David felt he had to take charge and be the head of the household, because Robin wasn't in the house for the majority of the week due to Margaret's banishing of him. Thus, he and Robin were constantly at odds with each other. Robin was the parent after all, and David was on the verge of assuming Robin's role. Furthermore, odd about all of this is that Robin continues to provide for the entire family despite everything that is happening. Since Margaret is unemployed, he continues to provide for her. He provides financial support to every child as if he were covering every expense and providing for every one of them. He reports for duty each day. He deposits all of the funds into a joint account, which either Margaret Alice or they can access to support their way of life. In any case, David was 22 years old in 1994. He was living at home, working as a newspaper delivery boy and receiving welfare, which he would then donate to his family. He also joined a men's choir because he had always liked music. In addition, he enrolled in college to study zoology in hopes of becoming a veterinarian. However, he left school very shortly after enrolling in favor of working frequently at an opera. He then made the decision to return to school to study classical music with hopes of becoming an opera singer, and all of his classmates thought he was a funny man. They said he was just the kind of guy who always took jokes in stride and had a terrific sense of humor. At the time, Arawa, then 19 years old, was residing in the family home while pursuing her teaching degree. She was one intelligent girl. She enjoyed some popularity at school as well. She was the school's head girl and had a large social circle. However, she disclosed to a few of her acquaintances that David was intrusive, domineering, and simply followed her around. He would just kind of show up to her plans, like he would just invite himself, so she avoided making arrangements with others as a result. He also received a gun. Furthermore, it seems that Arakawa revealed to one of her acquaintances that he had threatened to shoot several of his relatives. Leonie was the only family member not living at home when I was 18 years old. She was renting an apartment on Brussels Street and would sometimes visit her father in Tyree. She also worked as a sex worker, something she wished her parents were unaware of. She did, however, ultimately land a job at a cafe and set out to turn her life around. At that point, Stephen was still residing at home at the age of 14. He was obviously still in school, and Margaret made a concerted effort to keep him near to her because of his young age. He genuinely yearned for his father's acceptance. Clearly, though, Robin had been expelled from the home. With the exception of weekends and Monday nights spent at home, he didn't get to see his dad very often. In addition, unlike Laniet, Stephen was too young to simply go and remain with his father. David thus made an attempt to intervene and take on the role of a father figure for Stephen, something he made an effort to do for all of the children living in the main family home. Correct? He attempted to serve as a father figure to all of them, and they all found it really strange, which led to a great deal of conflict in the home, and there was a lot of tension there already, as if the family was essentially split up. There was a division between Robin's supporters and Margaret's supporters. Of course, David supported Margaret, Lenny supported Robin, and Stephen and Arawa occupied a somewhat midway ground. Consequently, Lenny returned home on Sunday night on June 19, 1994. She had informed a few of her pals that she was heading home for a family gathering and intended to make some amends with her relatives. All of them were at home that Sunday evening. Clearly, Lenny out had returned home. For the weekend, Robin stayed at home. Thus, the entire Bain family was present in the family house on Sunday night. And at 7 or 9 in the morning, on Monday, June 20th, emergency services received a call from David Bain, who was desperately calling for help for his old father. That old dead old. Acting as though they were all dead was preferable. Since we are a little older, if there's just one family there, please move quickly with every story or strength of a story. All right, there will be calls from 4 or 5, 4 to 5 to 7, 4, 5, 4 to 5 to 7, 35 to 7, on every street and some of those off of it. We're on our way. Your last name, Bain, adding to the message. All right, Mr. Bain, it will arrive very soon. Police show up just after 7:30 in the morning, and David wouldn't let them through the front door when they got there. In order to enter the residence, they ultimately had to break down the front door. Upon entering, they discovered David in a state of catatonia, indicating the direction of the living room. They proceeded to the living room by foot, and that's where the 58-year-old Robin Bain's body is discovered by the police. David had his .22 caliber rifle next to him. It was silent and contained 2 magazine shots. It was present. Another magazine containing 3 additional rounds was then present. The family computer was located within the living room as well, and it was turned on with the words, "Sorry, you are the only one who does have to stay," typed on it. Officers searched the remainder of the house and discovered the bodies of 2 people, 50-year-old Margaret and 18-year-old Leonie, both of whom were found sleeping in their own beds in respective bedrooms. It's possible that the shot to their heads occurred while they were sleeping. It appears that 19-year-old Arawa may have attempted to make a last-ditch plea for her life before also being shot in the head because her body was discovered kneeling. The 14-year-old Stephen was also killed in the same way as his family, but his bedroom was kind of hidden behind a curtain in Margaret's room, so no one immediately found his body. Thus, the fact that there was a bedroom behind this was actually unknown to the authorities. So it took some time for his body to be found. However, upon discovery, he was discovered shot in the head and laying on the floor, and he appeared to have fought back. An inquiry into the issues was initiated right away. Additionally, I just want to be clear that there is a ton of information available regarding this case and inquiry before we actually talk about it. I apologize for not being able to include every last detail, sir. If not, there would be 10 sections in this video. There are numerous contradictory reports. Numerous things in the inquiry went awry. You understand that I could only go into so much depth and that there are some things that I might not reveal. However, if there is anything you believe I should have mentioned or that you believe is crucial, please let me know in the comment section below. However, I have made every effort to take into account available data. The rifle that was used was discovered next to Robin, and all of the bones other than David's had been shot in the head. Thus, the initial image that one gets while visiting the crime scene is that Robin killed her entire family before shooting herself in the head. Although David wasn't completely out of the question as a suspect, he did support this hypothesis as well. After the killings, he went to stay with Margaret's sister and her husband for a few days. Many relatives also came to support him while the funerals were planned. He was clearly questioned in depth about the killings, as was the family member who was the only one still alive. The only person who could retell the events leading up to the killings was him. The only person who could shed any light on what transpired was him. I will thus discuss his account and his memory of the events leading up to the murders. He gave some of this information during his original police interviews, and he also gave some information after going through therapy, which helped him sort of recall some more events. I'm just going to compile everything. According to David, on Sunday night, when Leonie arrived at the family's house, he went with Leonie to a supermarket to acquire some hot chips. When he returned, they all ate the chips for dinner, along with some fish that Margaret had reheated in the microwave. David and Robin got into a fight at one time because David had mentioned he wanted to use the chainsaw the following morning, and Robin had refused. And it was simply another instance of David viewing himself as the head of the household. However, Robin was his father. So it goes without saying that they were constantly at odds with one another, sort of in a power struggle or to establish their authority. Around 9:30 p.m., David stated that he went to bed that evening as the family as a whole sat down to watch TV. Then at some point around before midnight, a car drove out of the house to make the routine trip to the closest ATM to load up the credit card. It seems like Margaret or Robin would frequently do this right before midnight. To prevent any more interest fees, proceed to charge some money to the credit card. David reported that he awoke the following day at his customary 5:30 a.m., and about 5:45 a.m., he and his dog left the house to use his newspaper route as his own. Along the way, he frequently checked his watch, and when it struck 6:40, he hiked up the hill to return to his home. And it took 2 minutes to walk up the hill. Thus, he was employed by 642 after his first police interview. He says Robin was awake when he arrived home since there was no newspaper outside the house. After leaving the caravan, he went inside the house and picked up the newspaper. David also mentioned that upon entering the house, he saw that his mother's bedroom had a light on. That, he surmised, meant she was already conscious. He so asserts that he went straight to his room after arriving home. Not even the lights were turned on by him. He removed his shoes. He pulled off his Walkman and placed it in the bed after setting his bag down from his newspaper. Subsequently, he descended to the laundry room and thoroughly cleaned his hand of all the black ink originating from the newspapers. In addition, he washed a number of items, among them a red sweater he had been wearing that week while delivering newspapers. He claimed that after that, he returned to his bedroom and discovered some bullets on the floor there, as well as the trigger lock on his weapon. His initial reaction was to rush to his mother to make sure she was all right. That's when he discovered her dead from a gunshot wound in her bed. Subsequently, he proceeded to go through each room of the house, discovering that all of his relatives had likewise been shot and murdered. Leonie was just hanging on to life when he heard a gurgling noise from her. Then he dashes to the caravan to see how his father is doing. En route to the front door, he goes through the living room, where he discovers his father's body. Beside him lies the gun, and on top of it is the PC with the suicide note typed on it. A significant red flag that arose very early in the investigation is the difficulty Robin would have had shooting herself in the head with this rifle. This is because, well, a rifle is long, and the angle at which the bullet entered his head made it seem highly improbable that he would have been able to hold the rifle and fire himself at that angle. The manner the bullet wound oozed blood was another piece of evidence that suggested his head had actually moved soon after he passed away. At 6:44 a.m., the computer was purportedly turned on, as well, giving David ample time to return home, switch on the computer, pen the suicide note by hand, and then shoot Robin. David's forehead was also injured. His knuckles were really red, and he had cuts on his knee and breast, and David was unable to articulate any of these wounds. The fact that Stephen's blood was discovered on David's clothing when police first arrived at the house further supported the police's theory that these injuries were truly the result of a struggle with Stephen. In Stephen's chamber, they also discovered David's leather theatrical gloves, which were stained with Stephen's blood and had a single glass lens. Next, they discovered a pair of spectacles with one lens missing in David's room. More blood was discovered on David's sock tops, and bloody sock prints with a trail to Leonie Art's room were discovered in Margaret's chamber. David initially stated that when he discovered his mother, her eyes were still open. Her eyes were closed, nevertheless, when the cops found her body inside the home. Robin's body was discovered on the other side of the room, and they also discovered a shell casing close to the computer. Given that he is obviously unable to shoot himself from the other side of the room, this shows that he did not shoot himself. Investigators were also informed by David that he was the only one who knew the whereabouts of the extra key needed to open the trigger lock that kept his firearm. They also questioned Robin's stated method of killing his entire family before taking his own life. After all, why did he spare David and leave a message claiming that he was the only one who deserved to live, yet significantly implicate him by using his gun and his gloves? And given how frequently they quarreled and engaged in power struggles, why would he keep David alive and believe he is the only one who deserves to stay? And amid all the familial strife, David was so often Margaret's ally. It is evident that gaps are beginning to appear in David's account. In addition, there was a dearth of evidence to support Robin's murderous role, and David's chronology from the time he returned home to the moment he phoned the police seems illogical. Though he says he arrived home at 6:42 a.m., he didn't contact the police until around 7 or 9 in the morning. That means he had almost 20 minutes to accomplish everything he wanted to. Additionally, he admitted to the police that he was unable to recall anything that had happened at that time. Clearly, David's situation is not looking good right now. He appears extremely dubious to investigators, and they have a ton of circumstantial evidence against him. To make matters even worse, they subsequently find 4 of David's bloody fingerprints on the firearm. Additionally, they discover Stephen's palm print on the silencer, from the supposed battle between him and the murderer. They also suspect that Stephen may have tried to use the quiet as leverage to push the gun away and worsen David's situation. There was blood on David's phone, which he used to summon emergency services, but not on his hands when detectives first arrived at the scene. Of course, when he first told the police his story, he claimed to have gone to the laundry and cleaned his hands in an attempt to remove all of the black ink from the newspapers. However, they discovered blood streaks on the detergent box and washing machine in the laundry. Additionally, they discovered a blood drop in the laundry sink. Along with the laundry David had done when he first got home, there was a green sweater. At first, he claimed that the sweater belonged to A, but later on, he changed his story to say that Robin owned it, and fibers from the green sweater had actually been discovered under Stephen's fingernails. Additionally, this sweater was found to have rubbed blood against the house's walls, most likely during the struggle that resulted in the murders. Margaret had reportedly told a friend that she was worried about David's well-being and that he was experiencing delusions and dark premonitions a week prior to the shootings. Furthermore, it seems that she did not agree with how controlling he was around his brothers. She thought Robin should have been the one to decide this. Given the information that has been uncovered, it is certain that David was detained and arrested 4 days following the killings. The cops think that he was acting like he was experiencing fits and blackouts. The trustees of the Bain Family Trust really gave the New Zealand Fire Service instructions to set fire to the Bain family home where the killings occurred, barely over 2 weeks after the murders on July 5th. This is obviously way too soon after the murders. It was allegedly done to stop someone from breaking in and setting it on fire out of rage. I'm not sure why someone would do that, but it seriously hurt the case and ruined a ton of evidence, which we'll talk more about in a moment. David's trial started on May 8, 1995.